In this example, we're going to look at a study from January 25th, 2012, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, and it's about the effects of overconsumption of low, normal, and high protein diets on weight gain, energy expenditure, and body composition. So you should read through the study in the PDF file and then come back and look at it. So take a minute and pause if you haven't read the study, and then you'll look more in depth with me. I chunked out the reading into 3 separate parts, so that's my highlighted notes over here. And then in reading through the study, I highlighted and used arrows to annotate and break down what was going on. So we're told the objective is to evaluate the effects of overconsumption of low, normal, and high protein diets on weight gain, energy expenditure, and body composition. So the explanatory variable is the change in these protein diets. I noted that as I was reading with the arrow up here. And then they're measuring several different responses. So the change, you only want to have one change so that you can understand how that one change is making a difference. But you can measure several different outputs. So the different outputs is they're measuring our weight gain, energy expenditure, and body composition. We were told about the design, the setting, and the participants. So the study was single blind. That means the participants didn't know who was in which group, but the researchers did. Randomized. So randomized means that the participants, once they were randomly selected, were then randomly assigned to these 3 different protein diet groups. Controlled tells us that they limited who they took into the trial, and the next few lines explain the controls. And then we're told there was 25 U.S. healthy, weight-stable male and female volunteers. So 25 is the sample size. The fact that they were weight-stable is one of the factors they tried to control. They didn't want to include anyone who'd been recently dieting or had fluctuating weight. The age limitations are another control, that they were 18 to 35. And then they also controlled the body mass index. So we're told about the first participant was admitted to the inpatient metabolic unit in June 2005 and the last in October 2007. As you're reading through this study, because it's a real medical study, there are some medical terminologies like metabolic, so you can go look those up or try to make an inference from reading what they mean. So I assume metabolic has something to do with how the metabolism burns and how the body burns energy. All right, then the intervention is described. So the participants first consumed the same weight stabilizing diet for 13 to 25 days. Then they were put on these 3 different diet plans: low protein, normal protein, and high protein. And then we're told they were overfed during the last 8 weeks of their 10 to 12 week stay. Then we're told how they did their measurements. So here's where some of the medical terminology comes in, how they measured the energy expenditure with a hood and water. And then we're given the results. So we find that overeating produced significantly less weight gain in the low protein group when they compare it to the normal protein and the high protein group. We're told the body fat increased in all 3 groups. We're told the resting energy expenditure and the total energy expenditure and the body protein did not increase when they overfed the low protein group, but it did in the high and normal protein diets. And then the conclusion from this study is that among the persons living in the controlled setting, calories alone account for the increase in fat. Protein affected the energy expenditure and the storage of lean body mass, but not the body fat storage. So our first question to think about is this an experiment or an observational study? I think we can all agree this is an experiment because the protein diet of the participants was manipulated. So then we want to think, what are the explanatory and response variables? And we already talked about that while reading. So you only want to have one explanatory variable because you don't want to have competing explanations and then you wouldn't know which was affecting the response. So here the explanatory variable is the level of protein in the diet. And they had 3 different groups: 5%, 15%, and 25%, corresponding with what they called low protein, normal protein, and high protein. The response variables can have multiple response variables trying to measure that one explanatory variable where you made the change. So here they had 3 different response variables: the weight gain, the energy expenditure, and the body mass index or BMI body composition. Our next question asks, is there a control group? So my interpretation of the study is that because every protein level is manipulated, there is no control group. Sometimes students like to say maybe the normal protein group was considered a control group. I'm going to say since they did manipulate that, I don't consider it a control group. But if you explain your reasoning and any assumptions you're making, I would be able to follow your logic. I also put a note here that the weight stabilizing diet at the beginning may have been an attempt to get a baseline measurement when we're told that all the participants consumed a weight stabilizing diet for 13 to 25 days before they were then assigned to the protein groups. Our next question is about what are the confounding variables this study attempts to control and how does the study attempt to control each? The researchers controlled for weight fluctuations by choosing weight stable participants, younger ages to control for age-related disease and other maybe age-related effects on the body. And then they chose a limited BMI range. They didn't go too low, so they didn't want anyone super athletic with very low BMIs. And they didn't go too high, so we know they didn't want people with very high BMIs. The experiment is described as a single blind randomized controlled trial. Use the vocabulary definitions to explain the meaning of this description. So hopefully in your reading you've read about single blind and randomized in chapter 1. So single blind tells us that the participants did not know which diet they were eating, but the researchers did. If both the participants and the researchers did not know, that's the scenario we call double blind. Randomized tells us that the participants were randomly assigned to the high, normal, or low protein diets. So you'll see in your assignments similar questions to this. So this is an example to help give you a good guide of how to break down an experiment. And again, the data is from a real experiment from 2012.